Hello and welcome to the Press Pass. Well, it's been a bit of a whirlwind 24/48 hours for AFC Bournemouth with Jonathan Woodgate, who was announced as the new head coach at the club. Of course, as fans, we're going to get behind him, but I wonder what process the club went through to get to this point. Lots of questions are being asked. We may never know. He was deemed as the best candidate, and nothing, of course, says best candidate and stability like a contract till the end of the season, hey? Dare I say it, it's been quite a confusing time for many Bournemouth fans, but a person who might be able to shed a little bit more light on the appointment and the interview processes in general is Mark McAdam from Sky Sports. Mark, how are you?
Yeah, good, Sam. Good to see you. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you at all. And with me as well, we've got two regulars, by the way, of Tom Jordan here. Tom, how are you?
Very well, thanks, Sam. Nice to see you, Mark.
How you doing?
And also
all
Mr. Tiggs. How are you, Tiggsy? You right?
Yeah, I'm all good. Good to have you on, Mark. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, brilliant. Me too.
So I'll kick off then. Mark, in your eyes, just explain this crazy 2 to 3 weeks in a nutshell, because we've heard a lot of names bandied about, but it was the guy that got the job that was already in the job.
I don't know if it's possible to explain everything that's happened over the last 2.5, 3 weeks. But, you know, when you look at appointing a manager, you know, it's probably the biggest decision that any football club will ever make. You know, you're trying to find someone that will completely transform and set out the identity for the football club, the philosophy, the way, you know, they approach games tactically, how they play football, you know, the players that they sign, the types of players that they sign, how often they train, do they travel to games on the coach, do they go to games the night before, do they fly, do they, you know, everything about the football side of the football club is decided by the manager, essentially. So when you're appointing a new manager, you are trying to find someone who fits into your ethos and everything that you believe your football club should be about. And if you can imagine, when you're looking for a manager, you've probably got 20 boxes that you want to tick. So the chances of you finding a manager that ticks every single one of those boxes is very slim, particularly when you're looking for a manager in February. You know, this isn't the summer where a lot of managers would like to go in. For example, Eddie Howe is a manager that would prefer to go into a football club at the summer, because he's then got the time to work with the players. He's got 8 weeks of pre-season. He can build the right type of team, put everything that he wants into the squad. And then, of course, by the time they start the season, he's essentially got 2 months worth of work into that team. So they understand what he wants and they understand him as a manager and the players. So you're asking for someone to go into the football club in February where you've got games every Saturday, Tuesday. You don't get the chance to work with the team. You don't get the chance to put your own philosophy into players, because they need a rest day on a Sunday. They need a rest day on a Wednesday. And then straight away, they're thinking about the next game. So this process and this situation was far from ideal for Bournemouth. And they were trying to conduct interviews in a really difficult situation. The club's on the balance of being in the playoffs in the Championship. They want an immediate return to the Premier League. And that's not something that's easily done. It's such a precarious season for obvious reasons with everything that's going on in the world. So, and I kind of feel sorry for you know, the board having to try and make this decision. Of course, the bottom line is they want Bournemouth to win every single game. They want the football club to be successful. They want the football club to return to the Premier League. They want to get the decision right. They want everything to be perfect. But this is football, and football's never perfect.
The board came out quite early, and they were straight away in the process and said that they were going to look for somebody as an external appointment, an external candidate. Do you think maybe that was maybe a bit quick for them to say that? Or can we look at Woodgate and think maybe he is an external candidate in terms of he's actually not been at the club that long?
Yeah, I think absolutely he could be classed as an external candidate. You know, Jonathan came down with experience of having managed Middlesbrough for 41 games in the Championship. He saw this as an opportunity for him to develop as a coach. This was a completely different environment for himself. You know, these were new relationships with Jason Tindall, with obviously the hierarchy, the board, Simon Weatherston, Stephen Purchase, Stephen Fletcher, all the people at the football club. This was a brand new start for him. So he was walking in just to develop as a coach, to learn something different, and then perhaps enhance himself to go on and take a management job down the line. So you could look at this as an external appointment, because Jonathan Woodgate came in with a completely fresh pair of eyes to Bournemouth. He had no history with the football club, didn't play for the football club, didn't really have any connections or relationships with anyone at the football club. So this was brand new. Of course, I think what the club did at that point was they tried to be honest, and they tried to say to fans, we were looking for an external appointment. We were looking for a fresh blood, for someone with new ideas, someone who could perhaps just take the football club slightly away from where it had been over such a prolonged period of time with Eddie and Jason involved. And perhaps in hindsight, they maybe wish they hadn't said that. But I think what they did it for was the right reasons. They wanted to kind of transform the footballing side of the club. And they felt that with a new man coming in as a manager, that was what they wanted to do. But the important thing to remember in all these situations when it comes to transfers of players and, of course, managers is that nothing is ideal and nothing is set in stone. And this process over the last 2 or 3 weeks has proved virtually every single day this has gone in a completely different direction. Yeah. If you spoke to me on the very first day of the managerial search, Jason Tindall sacked at 8 a.m. in the morning, who I thought the new manager would be, I'd have given you one name. 2 days later, I'd have given you another name. 2 days later, I'd have given you another name. And I'm someone that's party to a little bit more than the general public about what's going on. And I genuinely didn't know what was going to happen, who they were going to select, what was going to, what direction the whole thing was going to go in, because it did take so many twists and turns throughout this whole process.
Tom, from your perspective as a fan, explain what you thought and in terms of the media sound bites and your own view as a supporter. And then what we'll do is we'll come back to Mark and then we'll kind of square that off and see where maybe we were wrong. So obviously JT was relieved of his duties, and then what?
Well, it was kind of like what Mark said. It seemed like it took twists and turns all the time, didn't it, in terms of who it looked like the new manager could potentially be. Obviously, it didn't feel like the board kind of knew who their next manager was going to be. They just looked at the results on the pitch and it went down a road and they just thought, we can't keep going like this. So obviously decided to relieve Jason of his duties. And then obviously, Jonathan Woodgate was only just joined the club and obviously was told he would be in charge for the foreseeable until we got a new manager in. Or, if he'd done well, I suppose. We all know that. But yeah, it just seemed like, I think at first it was kind of John Terry and Frank Lampard and then it was David Wagner for a bit. It felt like, from, like you say, from different media outlets and journalists, it felt like, from a fan point of view, that, this is something to get quite excited about. It seems like it'll either be a big name or someone with a big CV. They were the kind of murmurings. And obviously, when you're hearing David Wagner done really well in the Championship, you're hearing John Terry, you're hearing Thierry Henry, Patrick Vieira, it was getting the fan base a little bit excited, probably, thinking that it's going to be someone. And there was a few things, about kind of all these unbelievable CVs that wanted the job and et cetera, and it felt quite exciting. And then from a fan's point of view, without being able to speak for everyone, it seemed like it kind of went down a route of, this is what Bournemouth want to do, but then they've realised, this will cost quite a lot of money, or it'll be quite difficult to get a manager, say a Thierry Henry who's already at a club. This will all be quite difficult. Panic. Panic seemed to set in, and then, okay, Woodgate's doing okay, we'll just take Woodgate on. But it never felt like, from the outside, that Woodgate was really considered until he was appointed. But yeah, like Mark alluded to, it did feel like there was just twists and turns all the time. Even on like the bookies and stuff, someone would be 20-1 and then odds on, and then the next day someone else would be odds on. It was crazy. But do you think that's a fair assessment, Mark? Obviously we don't know. We just know kind of black and white terms. We don't know how it all goes down, but it did seem to just take so many twists and turns, like you say. I
think, the biggest thing about this process for Bournemouth is this is a really unfamiliar process for the football club. When you look at, how many managers that have been involved since I joined the football club back in 2001, only 7 permanent managers. And I think there's probably very few football clubs in the EFL that have been in a situation where they've had less managers at the helm during a 20-year period. So in terms of, Maxim, the owner, and obviously Neil Blake, the CEO, and Richard Hughes, who's involved with the football operations side of things, this is something that they've not got a lot of experience with doing because, of course, Eddie Howe was there and then Eddie Howe went away and then came back again and was here for 8 years. So looking for a new manager is a new process for the football club. And it's something that Bournemouth haven't really had to do, for a long, long period of time. So I think what caught them out initially was, they were looking for a new manager. And they were shocked and surprised at the level of high-profile interest in the Bournemouth job. I think that very first day, the amount of interest from very high class managers with big CVs, big experience that were interested in little old Bournemouth. And I say little old Bournemouth because it's still, for me, little old Bournemouth. You know, we've had 5 years in flight. We've had the incredible rise from the bottom of League Two to the Premier League. We've been on the most amazing fairy tale journey in football. But for me, it's still little old Bournemouth. And the fact that you've got, like some of the names you've mentioned there, these people that are interested in taking our club on and taking it forward, perhaps caught the board out slightly. I think perhaps when you've got some of those, you know, some of the biggest names in world football over the last 20 or 30 years that want to be the manager of Bournemouth, it almost makes you sit back and go, wow. And I did it the same. You know, I was there Wednesday morning, just after 8 o'clock when Jason had been sacked. The statement had come out, and I'm in the car park at the Vitality Stadium, and I'm looking at the situation, and I'm getting the names coming through, and you look at the betting, and you're looking at some of these people, and you go, like, what? You're like, how is this possible? How do these people want to manage our little football club? And I think that's an indication as to how much we've built the club as a group, as a fan base, as a board. You know, Bournemouth has been put on the map over the course of the last sort of 5 to 10 years because of all the hard work that's been going on, the development of the club off the pitch, on the pitch, being in the Premier League, signing some of, you know, the most exciting players in world football, signing players that have got so much potential from the EFL. Over the course of years and years, this football club has built a reputation and a name for itself that competes at the highest level. And I think that perhaps caught everyone out. But you're right, it did seem like there was a bit of a journey that they were going on themselves through the beginning of this process. And the one thing I kind of like, you know, it really bothers me when football clubs sack a manager and an hour later or 24 hours later, they appoint someone else. Because clearly what's happened there is that they've been speaking to other candidates whilst there's someone in the job. I think we can all safely say that that essentially didn't happen for Bournemouth. They weren't trying to find a replacement for Jason, who had given 20 plus years of service to the football club whilst he was still doing the job. They essentially judged him on recent results and decided he wasn't the right man to take the club forward. And then, day one, Wednesday morning, they started the process to look for a new manager.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as the names came through. Mark, I've got to be very honest with you. I lost a lot of money. And the bookmakers, I've got to tell my wife after we finished here.
Money.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard. But we've got 15 games left of this season. Jonathan Woodgate's been given the job. There is an argument of whether he is the best name for it, considering the names that are out there. Have we just extended the interview process here? Do you think maybe this is just to get us to the end of the season, and then we're going to have another look at it and see if we can get another name back in?
I try and look at this situation as if I was the owner of the football club. You know, every single monthly board meeting or quarterly board meeting, however often it's done, I would want to know 11 players that could replace our starting 11 players. I would want to know who are 3 managers that are up and coming in European football and the EFL. I would want to know who are our replacements. Every time that you potentially lose a player or lose someone connected to the football club, who is the best man to come in? So I think if you're running a football club properly, you're constantly reviewing the players that you've got at the football club, who are the ones that are coming through. I know Bournemouth have an excellent scouting network and they're constantly reviewing, monitoring and watching players up and down the country, around Europe. They're trying to be, you know, at the very forefront of that, and they're trying to keep an eye on things. And I think it would be essentially no different if you are looking at managers. You know, who are the up-and-coming young coaches in the EFL? Who's doing really well with their respective clubs? Who's managing the under-23s at Arsenal or Chelsea or Liverpool? Who is developing in that regard as well? So I think, you know, constantly they will be looking at these situations, whether it be players or coaches or managers. I know that Neil and Richard will be looking at the situation, as will Maxim be, and saying, well, how can we improve this football club? What can we do to make it better? Who can we bring in that's going to enhance what we do? So it depends how you look at it. There's only one set of people that can ask that question, whether they're starting the process of recruitment from now to the summer, depending on what happens with Jonathan. But I think what we've got now is we've got a very settled situation. Jonathan knows he's taking the team to the end of the season. The players know that Jonathan's taken the team to the end of the season. And clearly, in May, there will be another decision made. Hopefully, Jonathan will win, 5 out of 6 games, keep the club in the playoffs, get promoted. And then the summer is an easy transfer. Jonathan gets a new contract continues in the Premier League, and we can all sit back and enjoy what's been a really, hopefully, an incredible season where they've got promoted once again. But football's football, and we could have an opinion right now that could change after we play Cardiff City, that could change after we play Watford, and we could be in a completely different situation. And the great thing is, no one knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, you say no one knows what's going to happen, Mark, and I'm sure it's been very, very busy for you, as it's been a busy time for the football club. What for you? Because obviously you've got loads of stuff going on. I'm sure you're a busy man, regardless of what Bournemouth are doing with their manager. But so what's it like for you in your role? When a club are looking for a new manager, what is kind of your role? How do you see it?
It's like being in a transfer window times 1,000. Transfers are difficult at the best of times, and invariably you'll have 2, 3, 4, 5 transfers happening per club on average per window. But the last 3 weeks or so has felt really, really intense. It's felt like you think you know what direction the football club's going in, and then it suddenly changes course, and then a new name comes to the table, and then someone else changes in the betting, and then there's another rumor on social media, and that's kind of it. It's been really intense, and I've had a few sleepless nights over the last few weeks because first and foremost, I'm a Bournemouth fan, so I want the right man at the football club. I want the club to be successful, and I know that that's absolutely what the board want to do as well. If anyone thinks that the board are just doing this for a bit of fun, or they're going for the cheap option, or they're going to try and get this wrong, then they're stupid. Let's be honest. What does everyone want? Everyone wants success for the football club, and of course, the people that are making the decision are probably sat there day and night thinking, if I get this wrong, I'm going to mess up what we've got here. I don't want to be the one that damages the football club. I don't want to make a bad decision. I don't want to put the club at jeopardy. I want to get promoted. I want to be in the top flight. So, it's a decision that will weigh heavy on the minds of those that are making it. And of course, Maxim, has invested huge amounts of money in the football club over the course of the last few years. I don't think anyone can ever say that he hasn't put his money where his mouth is. He's helped to develop the club both on and off the pitch. Of course, it's a process, and of course, the pandemic has helped to affect the direction that they'd like to take the club in. But going back to your early point, it's a really kind of horrible time for me because I'm emotionally attached to the football club, as well as being a fan. I'm also trying to report on what's happening, and that's the biggest thing that I can do in this whole process is I can just bring information to the fans that I believe to be accurate, fair, and true. And that's why perhaps people get a little frustrated with me at times when they look on my Twitter or they look on social media and they where's the update, what's happening, why have you not said anything? And I'm quite simply trying to say things that are accurate, because the more rumours, the more speculative stuff that goes out there, that's not handy for the football club, it's not handy for the people making the decisions, and it's certainly not handy for the fans, and the amount of times that I will say something on Twitter and then 2 or 3 weeks later someone will come back to me and say, well, remember when you said that? How wrong was that? Well, at the time it was right, and that's the way football goes,
I don't envy you, Mark, because like you say, it's you come out and say, some of the biggest managers, they're interested in the job. So then as soon as we, appoint someone that potentially hasn't got that CV, Mark, you said this, what are you talking about? So I don't envy you at all. Do you appreciate that from a fan's point of view, it almost looks a bit panicky because of the timing? So like you say, things change all the time, and obviously the board were maybe, surprised with the kind of the managerial interest in the job. And then Woodgate's been doing okay. I think the result against Burnley was brilliant, for example, got us to the quarterfinals, and we've been ticking along. And then he loses his first game, and then he gets it seems a bit panicky. And I think that's why, from a fan's point of view, it feels like panic. And it's certainly, like you say, they're going to want the right man for the job. It feels very odd that after that defeat, now they feel like he's the right. Do you know what I'm trying to say? I think that's why I think the fans feel like it's like push the panic button, because maybe a few names have turned the job down or were too expensive.
Let's look at this as objectively as we possibly can.
Yeah,
Eddie Howe lost both his first games as caretaker manager and then got appointed. So I don't think the QPR defeat has any relevance. I think the performance was essentially a decent performance. They had opportunities to go 2, 3, 4 goals up, but unfortunately didn't take them. I think also for a caretaker manager, it's always difficult to go into a football club, particularly at the minute, you know, with Tuesday, Saturday, you can't really spend a lot of time on the training pitch because 2 days of the week are taken up with recovery. 2 days of the week are taken up with match days. So then that leaves you with 3 days to actually work on, you know, the team, the shape, the identity. And of course, you need to work on set plays, you know, for QPR. You need to work on set plays for the games you're playing. So that takes another day out. So you've got 1 day a week to try and put something into the team. But of course, Jonathan hasn't known how long, essentially, he's going to be the caretaker manager for. So you can't rip up the identity. You can't rip up the philosophy. You can't change completely what the football club's been about and what they've been doing for the last 8 years under Eddie and 6-7 months under to Jason. So he's basically just a supply teacher to come in, everything as smooth as it possibly can, listen to the coaches that have been working for the players, listen to the players. His job isn't to make enemies or cause problems or change things. He's coming in there to keep it stable, to do a good job, to win games, be solid at the back, not concede too many goals. Don't get one of those headlines, Jonathan Woodgate loses 5-0, because that's not going to do him any good. It's not going to do the fans any good. And of course, those making the decision. So I think it was one of those, let's just be patient. Let's see how things go. And like you rightly say, Tom, you know, he took the club into the quarterfinals of the FA Cup for the first time since 1957. You know, that's an incredible achievement. Away at Burnley as well, which historically has never been a great place for us to go. I've been to Burnley a few times and watched Bournemouth. And, you know, I remember us getting pumped when Steve Cottrell was the manager in the FA Cup. That was the season where he stole John Spicer, Gareth O'Connor and Wade Elliott in the summer. I remember when Tekela Ranti scored that unbelievable goal and you thought, this is the start of TK, he's going to be brilliant. Sadly, he wasn't. So to go there and get a result in these circumstances was massively positive. And I think the fact that, you know, they'd had some really good, steady results against Birmingham. They'd beaten Rotherham. They were solid away from home at Nottingham Forest. You saw enough there in what Jonathan was doing that suggested he was a more than capable pair of hands to guide this football club over the course of the next few weeks. So I think he understood the football club. He knew what was going on. You know, there was a balance there. And let's be honest, we could have brought in a new manager and lost 4 games on the spin. We could have brought in a new manager and won 4 games on the spin. You just don't know how that would have affected the dynamic of that dressing room. You got the impression from the way the players were speaking, they were comfortable with Jonathan. They liked the training. I think they've got a huge amount of respect for him and what he's achieved in the game, and the same for Perchie and the other members of staff there. And I think it just felt like with the way that everything was going, the direction of the kind of managerial search, the names that were being attached, the kind of, I guess, perceived indecisive nature of what was going on, although there was so much stuff happening, it was just a process that you have to go through. It felt like this guy who'd been there, who'd been solid, who'd done really well, come down to the football club. I think it was probably the most sensible decision they could have made. But, you know, with football, there's no guarantees. You just never know.
So when names like Wagner and Thierry Henry get bandied about, I mean, where do these names actually come from? And also, from a fan's perspective, when you learn of these world-class CVs that are potentially interested, do you think in hindsight the club, however that information is leaked or whatever, do you think they think, I wish we hadn't have maybe said that now that we've reverted back to Woodgate?
I think probably, like everything in football, in hindsight, everyone would do everything very differently. The same way that, you know, I would do stuff differently in hindsight over the course of the last few weeks, over the course of the last few years, my career and work and family life. Everyone makes decisions that they perhaps regret a little bit later on down the line. But you always make those decisions at the time with the best interests. I genuinely feel like the club were trying to be open and transparent and honest. And perhaps they should have just shut up shop. You know, there are some football clubs that say absolutely nothing to the fans, and the fans are left wondering what's going on with my football club. Some perhaps say too much and then lead, you know, fans down the garden path, and they think the club's going in one direction, and then suddenly they do something different, and everyone's saying, well, you said this. Football is a moving feast, and nothing is ever certain, ever. You know, and you look at some of the players that perhaps Bournemouth have signed over the years, you look at them and you think, well, that was a bad signing. But then you put yourselves in the shoes of those making the decision. You look at the list of the 3 or 4 players they could sign in that position, and they go, well, you know, there's been times where I've looked at players that have joined Bournemouth and I thought, you know, why did you sign that player? And then you have a conversation and you go, well, these were the 4 options. And you go, well, oh yeah, I can see why you signed him now, because I would have taken him, and I would have taken him, and I definitely would have taken him. So there's always a thought process behind every decision, and I think the club perhaps just got caught out with being a little bit too honest, maybe trying to do the right thing, and of course, once you start this process of searching for a manager, there's nothing simple in football. There is no straightforward process where this is the situation. It's all black and white, bomb, 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 and go. There's always so many shades of grey that make this decision and this whole journey a really challenging one for anyone that has to make it. And I'm so glad that I'm not making this decision, because I can imagine how difficult it is.
It is a really difficult decision to make because it's such a big one, as you've already said, Mark. And I think I remember when we appointed Kevin Bond, and in the week leading up to it, there were rumours that Harry had rolled up to have a little chat as well with the board and maybe give some advice. And similarly, when Eddie got the job, Kevin Bond told us on an interview on here that he received a phone call saying, thinking about giving the job to Eddie. What do you think? Do you think the club have any previous managers on speed dial to help them out in this process, or is it just up to the people that are in that boardroom on a daily basis?
I think from early conversations I had with people at the football club, I think there was the number one thing they wanted to do in this whole process was take their time. That was one of the key messages I got told at the very beginning. They wanted to get the decision right. They wanted to do their due diligence. They wanted to find the right candidate, and they weren't going to be pressurized into making a snap decision. They wanted to get this right, and if that meant it took a little bit longer, then of course so be it. And I'm sure that there would have been a lot of conversations had. The people making the decision at Bournemouth wouldn't just be going sitting in a room and chatting between themselves and say, should we go for him? Yeah, should we go for him? What about him? They would have sat there for hours and weeks on end, quite literally, talking about candidates, talking about people, the same way they do when they sign a player. They do a lot of due diligence. What's the player like? What's he like on social media? Who does he spend his time with? Where does he live? How many houses does he have? How many cars does he have? Where does he spend his money? Who is his circle of friends? Where does he go on holiday? They like to know what they're investing into. And it will be probably the same +10 for a new manager. And of course, any manager that comes into a football club, it's not like a player where you just bring one person in. You bring in a player who's going to play at left back, a player that's going to play up front, and that's it. You're bringing in a manager who essentially will bring in a team of people. That's another big decision that the football club has to make. Do they bring in a manager who wants to bring in 5 of his own members of staff? So that suddenly means you've got to sack 5 people at the football club, 5 people that have been there for a long time, that have been loyal, that have been fair, respectful, and done a really good, solid, and decent job. And suddenly, within the space of 48 hours, you've got to tell them that they're no longer needed. There's a moral obligation for the football club to try and show respect to the people that are currently there doing the job. So that's one situation. You bring in a new manager and he wants to bring in 1 member of staff, 6 members of staff. He wants to completely change the whole football club. And as we've said already today, you can't do that in February when you've got Saturday, Tuesday for the next 10 weeks. You can't make those kind of big decisions and changes. So I think, I'm sure, Harry had obviously clearly spoken to, people at the football club to give his advice. His 55 odd years of experience in football, and I'm sure there were a lot of other people that were connected to the football club that would have given their opinion and advice. And, football's a game of opinions, and people that have worked with managers, people that understand managers, people that know, other people in the game, they would have gone to every corner of the globe to find out every tiny percentage of information that would help them make the decision.
Yeah, Tom.
Really tough,
Yeah, no, it's really difficult. And do you, obviously we've mentioned loads of names in there. Do you have any idea how many candidates there were? How many wanted this job? How many were considered for this job? Have you got a number?
Do you know what? I don't have official numbers. I remember, I go back to when Sean O'Driscoll left the football club for the first time. I remember having a chat with Peter Phillips, who I think he said he had something like 60 or 70 CV applications of potential managers within the first 48 hours, literally. And that goes from people that have managed, at the highest level to people that have been successful on Football Manager. People think that that's a joke when someone sends in a CV saying, I've won the season 3 times in a row with Rochdale. No, there are people out there that genuinely send in their CV thinking that being successful on Football Manager is enough for them to get an EFL job. There'll be a far-reaching people that have coached in, leagues in Europe, in the Romanian Premier League or the Dutch second division or whatever it is, that they feel that this is their opportunity in English football. So I would be surprised if there was probably less than 100 applications for the Bournemouth job within that first couple of days. I would be pretty certain there'll be a lot of people that would be very interested in the job. And there's people, there was a lot of names that sort of came out quite early of having an interest in the job that didn't even make it to the short list, or the sort of short list. So, I think there was a lot of interest from people that manage in the Premier League, people that have managed big football clubs, people that have, had promotions and successful campaigns in their management career that didn't even make it to essentially a short list of 6. I believe there was around 6 names that kind of made it to that first shortlist, and then I think the interview process got whittled down a little bit from that. So, I think that gives you an indication as to where the club was at. But that initial 48 hours where they're just getting all these names chucked at them, I think they were quite overwhelmed, and rightly so, because this is a huge job, a huge opportunity, and when you've got people you look at and you go, do you really want to manage Bournemouth? And the answer is yes, we do. We want to come in and be a part of this. And then it kind of, you have to digest that information and then kind of work out which direction do you want to go in.
So what's the process then? I mean, Jason Tindall gets sacked. He gets relieved of his duties. Are these people just going on the website and clicking the contact tab and, sending emails in? How are they communicating? And then is it all sort of emailed communication in this sort of time that we're in? How were they conducting the interviews? Was it done over Zoom or Microsoft Teams or something? I presume not done in person.
Yeah, obviously there's government restrictions in place, so meeting people face to face would have been very difficult during this current lockdown. So I don't think that was the case in this circumstances. I think there were lots of interviews on Zoom and meeting people virtually was the order of the day. I think what would have happened essentially when they'd sat down on that Wednesday morning after they'd sacked Jason the night before, and then obviously the information came out on the Wednesday morning, was they probably sort of sat down and had a chat and went, right, what do we want to do? Who's our targets? What type of a manager do we want? Like we said earlier on the podcast, this is someone that decides every single decision connected to the football team. Do they start training at 10 o'clock? Do they start training at 11 o'clock? Do they train for 5 hours or 2 hours? What hotels do they stay in? Do they, have, what type of a coach do they have? What type of hotel do they have? What type of a food do they eat on pre-match? What time do they eat their pre-match? Every single minuscule decision is made by this person that they are about to appoint. So therefore, you have to understand what every single one of the candidates does, the type of character they are, how good are they with the media, what's their training style like, what's their methods like, are they old school, are they new school, do they, have an entourage of people? So everything that they've got to kind of do, they go through that process. So I guess really they probably sat down on that Wednesday and went, right, what do we want from the new manager? Here's our ticks box list. These are the 10 attributes that we want the new Bournemouth manager to have. And then they will send out the recruitment staff. They'll speak to all the board members. They'll speak to everyone connected with football. They'll have phone calls coming in and out. There'll be a whole process. And then together they'll come together and go, right, here's a list of 20 names. Let's rule out 10 of them straight away. And then they'll go from there, do a bit more due diligence, do a bit more research. Then they'll discover some information. Oh, this manager likes to do this. I don't think that's suited for Bournemouth. That manager wants to do things in this way. That's not going to work for us. So we can rule those people out. And then eventually get to a list of sort of 5, 6, 7 names that will be right. These are the people that we need to do extensive research into. These are the people we need to really find out everything we possibly can so that we can then start to make a decision. And of course, that process doesn't take a day, 2 days. It takes several days, it takes several weeks. And they have to go through it properly because, essentially what the management structure at the football club will be doing is they will be putting together a presentation as they would for a player that they present. Obviously, a player would get presented to the manager. A manager would get presented to the board. So the members of the Bournemouth board will be presented with, say, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 names. These are the people that we've looked into. These are the people that we feel could be the right manager for the football club. This is all the information. This is the due diligence, the research, the character references, the style of play, everything about them that you wanted to know. We've put in this documentation, and now here it is. Have a look, go through it, ask questions, and then you make your decision based on the information. And I'm sure that the people that did that initial kind of presentation would have said, here is our recommendation to become the next Bournemouth manager. Now it's up to Maxim and the board. What decision do you want to make and what direction do you want to go down?
I mean, just to follow up on that, these are uncertain times, and it is a strange place at the moment, is football. Obviously, we've all met people online virtually throughout the last year or so, and we can meet someone online and they can come across as a really nice person, and then you can meet him in person themselves. You think, oh God, he's a bit of a weirdo or whatever, that kind of thing. Do you think this is all like maybe forms part of their reasoning why it's so short term? Because at the end of the day, these people, they've not even met in the flesh yet. I mean, maybe they have previously, but some of the candidates like Wagner, etc. Obviously, they've met in passing when we've been playing Huddersfield or whatever, but we don't know how they're going to gel with the team. Haven't met them in person, and people can be different in real life to what they are, via a camera. So I just wonder whether that's in their equation at all as well.
Yeah, it would be. I can speak myself. It's funny because I have a perception. I always tell this one story or several stories. I've been in football for over 20 years, but you always have a perception of what someone's like, whether that's a manager or a player. And one person that I remember being massively, massively surprised by was a player called El Hadj Diouf.
Yeah.
Now, everyone remember him, and he did some things on the pitch that, let's be honest, weren't very gentlemanly. And he wasn't very well respected. I think he pretty much got booed at every single away ground that he played at. And I got the phone call from one of my producers at Sky who said, can you go up to Leeds and interview El Hadj Diouf? And I went, yeah, fine, no worries. And I'm thinking, this is a guy I don't like. He's done things that I don't like, and he comes across as a bit nasty and a bit rude and a bit arrogant, and I just don't like his manner. So I turned up at the Leeds training ground, and sometimes you're never quite sure, these players that they're fragile individuals, and you never quite understand how they're going to act and what they're going to say and how they're going to be, and sometimes they're very different. And El Hadj Diouf walked over and he had the hat on and he had the bling and the jewellery and the gold, and I thought, okay. And he was like, you're Mark, yeah, nice to meet you, how you doing? Interview today. He said, yeah, fine, I'm just going to go and get some food, then I'll come back, blah, 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 etc., etc. And then he came back down. He said he'd be 20 minutes. He came back down in 20 minutes. And believe me, there's some people that have kept me waiting for hours and hours.
Yeah.
Still gone home and then had to come back again. So, so he came back when he said he would. He said, how are you doing? Are you okay? Do you need anything? Do you want a drink? Do you want anything to do? Do you need anything? Blah, 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 blah. And he was so friendly. And then he said, did a fantastic interview. He was honest and upfront, and gave some brilliant answers. And he was really, really kind of, he had me on the edge of my seat, and I was listening to every word he said. And then we finished the interview, and he said, what are you doing now? Do you want to come back to my house for some food with my family? Would you like to do this? Do anything else? And he was just the most charismatic, warm, friendly gentleman that you could ever meet. And I remember thinking, this isn't what I expected. I didn't expect you to be so friendly and nice and warm. And that's the great thing about football, or the sad thing, is that you judge people what you see on the pitch. Yeah. You judge managers what you see in TV interviews. And then you form this opinion of someone. And quite often is the case when you actually sit there and meet them face to face, that you actually go, oh, wow, you're totally different to how I perceived you to be. And I'm sure the Bournemouth board went through the same sort of process. They would have, sitting, talking to someone on Zoom is difficult anyway. We've all done it over the course of the last 12 months. Yeah. So therefore, this would have been a really big challenge when you're you're talking to someone potentially who could be the manager of your football club, and you've got to decide by looking at this stupid camera thing here, on the screen, that this is the person to take my football club forward. So, like you rightly say, it would have been a really difficult decision, because you would have been you'd have had these preconceived ideas of what these people are like based on the media, which, as we know, not everything goes, apart from perhaps pre and post match in the Premier League, where you do get that unedited, 4 or 5 questions, which might be sort of 2, 3, 4 minutes long. Everything else is sound bites. It's 30 seconds. It's a minute. They do something silly or say something funny, that gets put on air and repeated on Sky Sports News for the next 12 hours, good or bad. And that's what you're making these judgments on. So this process that Bournemouth would have gone through would have been, a lengthy process where they would have probably for the first time sat down and spoke to people at length and really kind of engaged with them and learnt from them and understood the type of characters they are. Because, a manager has a philosophy, he has an identity, he has a plan, he has a procedure, he has a structure. And that's not something that they can, tell you in 5 minutes. That could take hours, days, weeks to kind of really understand what that manager wants to implement. So, I'm sure they would have probably sat down with some of these people virtually and gone, well, he's changed my mind. I didn't expect him to be like that. That person said some really interesting, informative, unique things. I liked the direction he was going with that. That was important to me. And then, obviously, they just take all those pieces of information and try and build up, what they believe that character is and whether that is the right fit for Bournemouth.
I was going to say that we're assuming that there won't be any more surprises, but Jonathan Woodgate is obviously the new manager to the end of the season. Is there any danger of him mixing things up and saying, I want my own assistant? Are you, from your point of view, do you expect there'll be no other surprises, or is that something that Jonathan's more than entitled to go, I want my own people in now?
Yeah, I think with the nature of the situation, the fact that he's in place to the end of the season and we are coming to the end of February now, what have we got? 2 full months left, March and April, so 8 weeks or so, and then a little bit in May, and then the season's over. Hopefully, we're hoping, of course, that it gets extended to Wembley in a playoff final. I would be surprised if there was any huge changes. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it would be unfair to the people that are currently in work at the moment and have been working hard all season under Jason and, of course, Jonathan over the last few weeks. I think, there won't be any significant changes. Would I be surprised if he was to bring one person in as a mentor, as an extra pair of hands, as a bit of advice, as some support? That wouldn't surprise me if that were to happen. But of course, there's good people around. Perchie's a Bournemouth legend. He's been around the football club for a long time. He worked with the 23s. Eddie saw him as someone who could work with the Premier League first team and promoted him, and he did that for a number of years as well. So clearly he's an experienced pair of hands and a very, very highly regarded and respected coach. Simon Weatherstone's been around Bournemouth for a long time. He's worked with Eddie, he's worked with Jason, he went to Burnley, he came back again. And of course, you've got people like Steve Fletcher and Jimmy Glass and Neil Moss and Neil Moss's staff, and all the other people that are around the first team. So there's a lot of experience there. There's a lot of knowledge that are already, is already at the training ground, already in the building. Jonathan might feel that he wants just one person that he knows, that he trusts, that he's worked with before, that can come and be honest with him and say, Jonathan, you're getting it wrong, mate. I think you're making mistakes. Whereas perhaps some of the people that have already been at the football club might be a little bit more reluctant to be that person to not criticise, but to have an open dialogue about what his decisions are. Why did you make that substitution then? Why did you do this? Why haven't you done that? Why are you starting him? Maybe Jonathan would want someone in there that's got that honesty, that he can trust, that knows that he's there to back the decisions that Jonathan makes, as opposed to someone who's there to kind of counteract the decisions. This is how Eddie did it, or this is how Jason did it. Maybe that could be the case. I don't know. I'd have thought that wouldn't surprise me if that happened, but also it wouldn't surprise me if they just went with what they've got, because let's be honest, it's 10 weeks or so of the season left. So they just need to keep things very stable, make sure you stay in the playoffs, take it game by game, which is really boring. And I know whenever I ask a question that involves a game by game answer, I'm like, I can't think of something more inventive than that. But that's quite literally what they have to do.
Yeah.
On Twitter, Mark, you get a lot of fans, and they're wondering why we don't hear more from the chief executives of the club, or we don't hear more from from Blake, for example, or Max Demin's representatives. Why do you think it is that they don't communicate very often with the fans?
Well, I can't answer that question, of course. I don't know what their thought process is when it comes to the media and having an open dialogue and fans forums. And, you know, it's a difficult one to know, you know, as to why or why not they don't see fit. You know, some football clubs have, you know, chairman, chief execs and owners that are on social media and they engage with the fans, and some have nothing at all. And, you know, Neil's kind of very deeply involved with running the football club. He wants the very best for the football club. He's got, you know, essentially as a chief exec, you've got two kind of sets of people you need to look after. One is the football club, being the football side of things. You know, you've got 25 to 40 backroom staff that are all working busily behind the scenes. You've got a manager, you've got his coaching staff. Then you've got 20 to 30 players. Then you've got the under 23s. Then you've got the 18s. Then you've got all, you know, so you've got a whole raft, hundreds and hundreds of people that are connected to just the football. Then, of course, you've got the other side of the football club, the catering, the conferencing, the commercial, the club shop, the ticketing, and all of that side, and the media, and all of that side of the club. So you've probably got, you know, 150, 200 plus people that you've got to manage and look after. And when you've got one pair of hands, and of course you've got an owner that wants to know what's going on and wants, you know, weekly and monthly updates about how the football club's being run and what's happening, you don't have a lot of time to engage with the fans, perhaps sometimes as much as you'd like. And as we've seen over the course of the last few weeks and months, social media isn't a very pleasant place to be. And, you know, let's be honest, and I've had it over the last few weeks where I look at my phone, and I had it the other day. I looked at my phone and I had a few negative messages and people having a pop at me and sort of, you know, making comments about me. And actually, I remember driving to my game, and a couple of hours later, those messages were still going through my head. And I was really upset by it. And I remember thinking, you know, don't let yourself get caught up with it. It's just one person's opinion who wants to have a pop and say some nasty things about you. Imagine if you're a footballer that's getting that every single hour of the day. Imagine if you're an owner that's getting that every single hour of the day. People sending what they think about you, sending emojis, sending things that are derogatory, that actually just make you question, why would you even engage with these people? Why would you even have social media? In fact, if I didn't have a job that worked in the industry, I'd probably be reluctant to be on social media because I'm quite shy, and people might think that's quite weird because of what I do and I'm on TV, but it's just something that I'm not very good at. You know, I live on my own. I get on with my life. I love me football, but that whole world of publicity and selfies and look at me and look at this, it's just not for me. And I think Neil's very, very similar. He just wants to focus on working hard at running the football club. And I'm sure there's probably a balance between not being on social media and not engaging with the fans, but doing it a little bit. And I think maybe one day they'll find that balance right. But I don't think there's many football clubs that have got that balance right between being engaging and speaking to the fans and then not being engaging. Because, of course, you know, this is the thing as well. You could say one thing in a fans forum on a Wednesday night, and then a week later it makes it look like you've lied, or it makes it look like true. And it's not the case. It's just that's how quickly things move in football. You know, I've had a phone call, for example, player, he's driving down to Bournemouth. He's going to sign medical this afternoon. And then 2 hours later, he's U-turned on the M3 and gone and signed another football club. That is what happens. You know, things do genuinely happen. And you think something's happening, and then suddenly it doesn't happen. You know, deadline day, when Jack Wilshere signed, that was one of those days where things constantly changed. What's happening? Yeah, we think Jack's coming down. Okay, fine. Jack Wilshere's coming down. Has he left London? Yeah, he's left London. He's going to be here in 2.5 hours. Okay, fine. And then an hour later, you get a phone call. AC Milan have come in for him. They want to take him on loan for the season. Okay, right. What does that mean? Well, we're not sure now. We're waiting to find out. Football changes, and it changes so dramatically. In the end, of course, he turned up at 6:30, and the fans were there to greet him, and he signed for Bournemouth on loan for the season, and it ended up being the most successful campaign in the club's history. So these things happen, but things change so quickly as well. And that's sometimes why it's difficult to put things out there in black and white and to say things that actually could become very, very wrong within the space of a few hours.
I remember when Jack come in. I was so excited about Jack coming that I put money on him going to AC Milan just to soften the blow. If he did choose AC Milan, I remember doing that, and was never been so delighted to lose a bet. But no, I think, like I said, Mark, I don't envy you, because I think sometimes you probably, on social media and things like that, you kind of like feel like the messenger sometimes, because you're putting out something you've heard. And I think, from my point of view, I would try and take that with a pinch of salt, because I think at the end of the day, you are just a messenger. No one's personally. I know, I'm sure you've had some horrible stuff, obviously, but as we all have over time. But I think in general, from what I know anyway, it's just the fact that you're just the one that put the quote out or something. So people are just, using your tweet or things like that. When I think deep down, no one's expected, thinking that you've got any sort of agenda. You're just providing information that you've been given. Do you know what I mean? Like I say, it changes.
I remember, Tom, didn't you quote a tweet from Mark McAdam once, actually? And that was about Ryan Fraser, wasn't it?
Ryan Fraser.
Can you tell us about that, Tom? What was that?
I'm one of them. I guess I'm one of them fans that I can't. A lot of people like that. When it looks like, obviously we're just fans. We just see what we see on the pitch. It looks like a player's down tools, so to speak. Which obviously the general consensus is when a player didn't continue playing for us. That's how it looked. And right at the start of the season, I was just saying I think we should cash in on Ryan, because is he really going to give his all? And we had a brief conversation where you said, if you know Ryan, he will give his all. So that kind of blew up a little bit because of what ended up happening. But like I say, that was never anything against you. That was just,
And you know something as well? You were right and I was wrong. And I've spoken to Ryan about this. I genuinely believed at the time, from everything he'd said to me, from what I'd seen in training, from the type of character he was, that there is no way on earth that he would down tools. And I don't want to say he down tools, but he certainly, the dynamic of his performance and the level of his input into the football club changed. And I didn't think that would be possible, but he did, and I was wrong. And that was funny, because that was one of those tweets that people, always come a favourite or retweet, like 6 months later. And it absolutely, I was so wrong about that whole situation, because I believed Ryan would be the type of player that wouldn't do that. But Ryan Fraser's an emotional character. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's very honest. If you look at all the Bournemouth player interviews over the last few years, he was one of those interviews that constantly said something. You went. And there's part of me that's going, oh, this is a great story. And there's also part of me thinking, Ryan, why are you saying that? That's going to cause a headline. Don't say that. But he was just so honest. And again, how many players would be honest and say, yeah, I'm finding it difficult. I'm not playing at my best. I'm not giving 100%. All the speculation is affecting me. And again, he's almost been penalised for being honest. But yeah, that was one of those situations where you put out a tweet. I did it this window, with Goz. He got told the information. Goz wants to stay. He wants to put the right relegation. He wants to do everything right. He wants to fight for his place. And then 48 hours later, he's at the Watford training ground doing a medical after turning down Nottingham Forest. And then you go, oh, what? Now I look totally stupid. But again, it goes back to the same thing we keep saying. Football changes literally minute by minute. And that's the dynamic in the industry that we're in. It's so fast paced. And things can change. So yeah, no, I vaguely remember that, Tom. So yeah,
I think it's really sad. Whatever we all think about Ryan as football fans, I think that's what's so difficult is players get, and managers get kind of criticised when they just give the same answers. And he was someone that you always thought, oh, he's giving you something here. And like you say, it ended up working out for him. But I think it's sad because he was a player that we all loved, and it just didn't. And now you can't help but, when Newcastle ain't doing very well, you have a little dig here and there. And that is, I'm sure he's not surprised by that. But I think it's more, I don't think it's, I think fans are really just frustrated because they saw a player that Eddie kind of brought through and was really developing. It felt sad to me. I don't know what you think, Sam, but it felt sad to me that it ended that way, because Ryan could have been a real legend of the football club.
He absolutely could have been, and we will wrap it up with this final question. But he almost said too much, and that interview, I think it was with Chris Temple on BBC Radio Salient, where he said something along the lines of, "I haven't been playing for the team." It always sticks in the brain. Now, I just want to say, Mark, Eddie Howe, legend of the club, Jason Tyndall as well, 22 years service. also a legend. Very different media approaches since they left. Ryan Fraser was a person that said too much. Bournemouth fans are starting to think that JT is saying too much as well at the moment by him doing all sorts of media stints and various interviews and podcasts. There's probably one out today with him somewhere, or he's on TalkSport or whatever. What do you make of the fact that they've taken such different approaches? Do you think JT's almost trying to stay relevant, or what's that all about?
I think everyone's different. I think I don't know. You'd have to speak to Jason in terms of what his mindset is, what he wants to do, what's the next direction for him. Does he want to go and become a manager in the EFL? Does he want to become a number 2? Does he enjoy the coaching side of things, or does he want to take his life in a completely different direction and go and do other things away from football? I think everyone's different. We all know that whilst Eddie did the media, he didn't really enjoy doing the media. It wasn't something that he was passionate about. It wasn't something that he particularly enjoyed, and I know so many conversations with Ed over the years, and I'd say, "Oh, Ed, any chance of an interview?" And he'd go, "Oh, Mark, Mark, that was always his famous things and questions about players and transfers and interviews." But he would do it sort of almost begrudgingly. And Jason was, different philosophy and happy to do interviews and things. I think it's always difficult as well when a manager gets sacked. The first thing you're thinking about, is, am I going to get another job? There's 92 jobs out there. There's 92 assistant jobs out there. That's not a lot when you've got an industry that has thousands and thousands of people in it that are all desperate to make their way up the pyramid to managing the EFL, to managing the Premier League. So therefore, you want to stay relevant. You want to stay in the public domain. You want people to know about you. You want to get job interviews. You want to get another job. So maybe Jason has been open and honest. He's been asked the question, "Would you come on to my show? Would you come and do an interview?" And he's gone, "Yeah, fine." And some people sort of would say, "Oh no, I don't fancy that." I've been in the situation where you speak to managers, and an hour after they've been sacked. Do you want to do some publicity? Do you want to do an interview? Do you want to talk about it? No, you don't. What your thought process is? And some managers say, yes, I'll do it, no problems. And some say, I need a bit of time just to think about things. I want to digest the information. So everyone's different. Jason has been open and honest and transparent, and maybe too honest, maybe too open. And that's another problem. People want people to be engaging and talk and be open, and then sometimes people say, "Well, you shouldn't have said that." And it's like, well, hang on a second. You can't go to someone and ask for an interview, and then when they give you an interview, slag them off for doing the interview and saying this and saying that. It's a lose-lose situation. Everyone in those situations loses. So invariably, you find most managers say nothing. But then you can always tell when a manager wants to get a job because they then start doing the media stuff. But of course, there's so many things at play when a manager gets sacked. And often, actually, a lot of managers sign non-disclosure agreements so that when they do leave a football club, they're not allowed to talk about that football club for 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is. Frank Lampard, for example, he left Chelsea. He hasn't done a single interview, hasn't said a single thing, because he's in a situation where he probably wants to, keep the relationship, keep that level of respect between him and Roman and the people that run the football club, and then of course they can, go from there when he's ready to get the interview, when the 3 months is up or the 6 months is up, or he's ready to take the next step. Then he'll probably do a bit of TV. You'll probably see him on Match of the Day or something like that. So yeah, it's a lose-lose situation. I do feel sorry for these players and managers because they get asked to do something and then they say something, then they create headlines, and then it's more problem. Invariably, you're better off just saying, "Do you know what? I'm going to say nothing."
I've got to be cheeky, Sam. I've got to be cheeky and ask one more thing.
Go on.
Was there ever a time that you thought, you know what, Eddie might come back, If you're honest, do you ever think, just, not any inside information or anything, but did you ever think, just personally, could Eddie come back?
Do you know what? When you look at the whole situation, of all the extensive list of people that were in the betting, who was the best man, the right man, the only man that could take Bournemouth from the Championship to the Premier League whilst they were currently in 6th place with half the season or so, just under half the season to go? On that list of people, who was the right man? it probably was Eddie Howe. Was there any part of me that thought genuinely that actually it might happen? Pretty much 0%. I think that journey had happened. That story has been told. I genuinely feel like, certainly for now, that the chapter has been closed. I think Ed went on that incredible journey. I call it the greatest fairy tale in football because that's what I believe it was. And there'll be other people that will disagree and have their own thoughts on that. But he was a part of that. I think he's had a really nice year out with his family. He's got a young family, 3 young boys. I think he's done a bit of homeschooling and spent a bit of time with them, and spent a bit of time with Vicky, his wife, because he as we all know, Eddie was a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. 7 days a week manager. He committed 110% to the football club. And I think for the last year, he's committed to his wife and kids, and he's probably learnt a lot about himself and enjoyed that time away from it all. So as much as I'd have loved to have seen that romantic connection with Eddie Howe and Bournemouth back again, I think maybe if it was a few years after he'd left, it may have happened. It could have happened. It could have been closer to happening. But the fact that it was only sort of 7 or 8 months after he'd left, I don't think it was ever a possibility. As much as I'd love to say, Eddie moved back for a 3rd time. Not yet, but I think one day we'll definitely be saying Eddie Howe's back.
You know what a way to end an interview. It's been going so well, and now I just feel so flat now for the rest of the day. But I'll tell you what,
all good stories have a trilogy. It'll be back.
That's right. And it's all the more poignant as well because we spoke to Simon Francis last night on Back of the Net, and he was retelling the stories of the good old times and the class of 2014, 2015, and it made us really emotional. And there were people on the live chat saying that they were in tears at some of the stories that Frano had to say. So it's maybe there will be a trilogy. Mark, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your insight as ever. Much appreciated.
Anytime, my pleasure, guys. Anytime.
And I appreciate we went on for a lot longer than what we said originally. So thank you so much. And also Tom and Tiggs, thanks very much, guys.
Cheers, boss.
Thank you, buddy.
Remember to like and subscribe, of course, and we're going to be producing more content over the next few days, including some build-up to that huge midweek match against Cardiff. See you in the next one.